I've said before that October, November could be a perfect storm to get us a great bull run. And the possibility of that is now bigger than ever because voila, an appeals court has declared Trump's tariffs, most of them illegal. Now, if you're in the aluminum, steel, or auto industry, you're still screwed because those tariffs are not illegal. Also, the tariffs that he put on China in his last administration under the Emergency Powers Act are also not illegal because China was using American trade deals to steal technology. However, the other tariffs that he put on, Europe, Canada, Mexico, and a lot of these other countries, this term, they are illegal. And unless the Supreme Court overturns this decision, they're going to be null and void. And they made this declaration because the powers of the purse reside with Congress and not the president. Now, there is a question of can he use the 1977 Emergency Act to actually enforce these tariffs? And the appeals court, like the circuit court before them, basically said no. The circuit court was 3-0 unanimous on the panel, and 2 of those judges were actually Republican. The appeals court ruled 7-4 against Donald Trump's tariffs. So there you have it right there. If they are overturned, we will shoot up a lot because altcoins still have not regained the momentum we had pre-tariff. And the producer price index is going up, and that is also going to be one of the reasons that we may not get a giant rate cut from Jerome Powell, and we might have to wait until next May. However, if these tariffs are overturned, I think Jerome Powell will give us consecutive cuts. So if you want crypto to go up, you want these tariffs to go away. And of course, the Supreme Court, I think, should rule against Trump because I do think he extended his powers way too far, and he is definitely taking some of the powers that he's not supposed to have, that Congress is supposed to have. And the reason he didn't go through Congress the first time is because he knows that he doesn't actually have the votes in Congress to pass these tariffs. There is a political cost in opposing Trump, but there is also a huge political cost in supporting these tariffs, and these tariffs are the most unpopular of his policies. They poll at -30 or -40 or something like that. Even though his approval rating is somewhat underwater, nowhere near as unpopular as these tariffs, and people are getting really mad about them, especially small businesses and farmers and Wall Street, which are 3 of his big support groups, especially the farmers. So he's definitely having trouble protecting these, but that's good for us. Hopefully the Supreme Court does not rule in his favor because then I do think the market might actually go down. But let's actually check out what's actually happened here. So most Trump tariffs were ruled illegal. So basically on Friday, a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit ruled that Trump's imposition of reciprocal tariffs on countries, as well as those on China, Canada, and Mexico, ostensibly in relation to fentanyl trafficking, was an overreach of his authority. Now, the ones on China that he imposed last term are not illegal, but these are actually illegal. That said, those tariffs will be allowed to persist until October 14th, so that the Trump administration has time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. At first blush, this development might seem to benefit stocks, which have already had rip-roaring August. For the month, S&P added nearly 2%, DJIA added 3%, and the NASDAQ composite rose 1.6%. However, tariffs flickering in and off might be more anxiety-inducing than the uncertainty of planning strategies around tackling those duties, and that means potentially volatility in the markets, which is not good for the markets. August gains could be tested in September, the worst month for the S&P 500. So here it is. Most Trump tariffs are illegal. U.S. Appeals Court rule on Friday, and they gave them until October 14th. So, this is a big blow for Trump, but could be really good for crypto traders. Friday, 7-4 appeals court decision tossed out a part of the ruling, striking down the tariffs immediately. Given his administration time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, the ruling represents a major setback for Mr. Trump, who has said his trade policies would enrich the U.S. by bringing back manufacturing jobs and contributing billions in new revenue to the federal government. So essentially, this ruling highlights a serious legal threat to one of the president's most high-profile economic policies. Basically, 6 of the 7 judges who ruled against the tariffs were appointees of Democratic presidents, while the 7th is an appointee of former President George W. Bush. Of the 4 who dissented, 2 were appointed by former President Obama and 2 were by George W. Bush. However, in the circuit court before this, 2 of the 3 judges on the panel were actually Republican president appointees, including a Trump appointee. So, it's been a months-long legal challenge brought by Democratic states and small businesses. It's a class action lawsuit, but it's mostly like it was first started by small businesses, and some of the Democrat attorney generals have actually weighed in. So basically, the Liberation Day tariffs were actually illegal. He tried to use the IEEPA, which is the 1977 International Emergencies Economic Powers Act, by declaring long-standing U.S. trade deficits a national emergency. In February, he invoked the law to impose tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, saying that illegal immigration and drug trafficking amounted to a national emergency and that the 3 countries needed to do more to actually stop it. So, those are actually illegal now, and that could be a breath of fresh air, obviously, to people that want a crypto pump. If they're declared illegal and he has to rescind them, we'll get tax cuts immediately, because Jerome Powell says basically the tariffs are the only reason we haven't got the tax cuts, and that will definitely get the markets to pump. But that's only one of the factors why we could actually get a mega pump. Others, of course, are the ETFs that we've talked about, and they will come, I think, starting October 16th. There's more and more of them getting filed. Binance just got one filed. CRO just got one filed, and more cryptos are getting filed. They're definitely testing this SEC to see what it'll allow. And so far, it seems like this SEC will essentially allow everything, which means, it might have a delayed effect, because if you look at the Ethereum ETFs, once they were first implemented, they didn't really stir up that much interest. But now, now people are very, very interested in this. So obviously, this is them being interested in this is a very good thing for us. And I think that will definitely play to our favor. What's actually going to happen, because I think it could be a month or 2 delay before some of the big ones like Solana or XRP or Cardano actually get picked up, and then we'll have a bull run probably end of this year, beginning of next year. But anyways, starting in maybe about November, that perfect storm is actually brewing. We have news today that Coinbase OKX is going to steer Australian pension funds into crypto now. And that's really big, because Australian pension funds represent $2.8 trillion. Now, obviously, not all the $2.8 trillion are going to actually come into crypto. That would be insane. But it's not only the Australian pension funds. U.S. pension funds are looking at it too, and that's $7-8 trillion, if not more. So, of the $2.8 trillion of the Australian pension funds, I would be actually kind of surprised if we got more than 50 or 60 billion, because that's about 2%. And obviously, pension funds are supposed to be in safe investment items. So you're not going to get people to put all the pension funds in something like Bitcoin or more volatile assets. Now, Coinbase and Kraken are targeting SMSFs. Those make up about 25% of Australia's pension pool. And so that's roughly $700 billion. Now, if you can get 5% of that, of the SMSFs, that's still $35 billion. So I definitely think, we should be thinking about a number in the tens of billions for these Australia's pension fund. It's not going to come in immediately, but even 30 to 50 billion coming in over the next 2 years, that could be huge, and it could definitely offset a lot of the costs. Right now, only about 1.1 billion in Australia's pension funds is actually in the crypto market, but AMP is the only major Australian pension provider that actually has bought into crypto. And that's what the Coinbase and OKX products are going to change. I think more of them will come into crypto, especially when they see that the ROI for crypto is much higher than the ROI for other vehicles. So Coinbase has been preparing SMSF services since 2024 and will roll out the full product in the coming months. The potential clients from the waiting list show an 80% probability of establishing a new SMSF, while 77% plan to invest up to $65K in digital assets. Coinbase's approach aims to tap newer generations of investors who are often crypto natives and more comfortable with picking their own investments. Younger investors open to SMSF years earlier than previous generations and allocate more to digital assets. So they are actually expecting a lot of money coming into this. And of course, Coinbase and OKX have attempted to stay within the boundaries of current crypto regulations, and I think those are going to get looser as well. So not only American pension funds, Australian pension funds representing 2.8 billion, but realistically probably only 700 billion or so are actually available to these crypto products that Coinbase and OKX are actually pushing. So that will bring more money into crypto, and that's probably going to start to come in the next few months, along with the US pension funds. Of course, Wall Street is setting to dive into DeFi. That honestly makes a lot of sense because DeFi is extremely lucrative, and Wall Street sees DeFi as a threat to their business because it offers higher yield. But many of the players in Wall Street also want a piece of the pie because, it's a lot of money, so why wouldn't they? Now, Joseph Lubin, just ignore his 100x rally for Ethereum because Ethereum is definitely not going to 100x, nor is it going to flip Bitcoin anytime soon, but it will indeed go up. And basically, institutional interest is rising for Bitcoin, for Ethereum ETFs as well. But remember, if Wall Street gets into ETFs, they are going to look at things like Solana as well, because Solana will have an ETF as well. And the thing is, I think there's going to be more users for Solana's ETF than Ethereum's ETF. Yes, the money is still trapped in Ethereum, but don't overlook the Solana ETF. I think financial institutions are going to be very, very interested in a system that works much better than Ethereum, I think, and also is much faster and cheaper than Ethereum. And I think both Solana and Ethereum will have staking and things like that people are very interested in. So this will boost the entire entire DeFi market up. And I do think DeFi is one of the major drivers. And I think there will be a FOMO into DeFi, maybe even harder than the FOMO into DeFi last time. And that's going to drive the market up overall. Now, I'm hoping that some of these DeFi systems won't be entirely siloed off, basically. I think a lot of them will actually be because these founders do want to keep the money in their own ecosystems. That's still going to result in a lot of players coming in, but there could actually be a lot of cross-chain action. Hopefully they actually can get the security to be up on that and not scare people off. So I think the interest in the Ethereum ETF, the interest in staking, as well as many other things, is another huge factor that can lead not to a Bitcoin rally, but an altcoin rally. It will continue to have basically Ethereum rise against Bitcoin. And I think with Ethereum rising against Bitcoin and ERC20 rising against Bitcoin, that'll benefit SPL, Solana, BSC, and the rest as well. Not to mention, all those coins also have ETFs, and a lot of those coins are actually getting treasuries as well. So this is great news for those of us that want an altcoin bull run. And combined with the huge news that the tariffs may actually be illegal. And I think I'll give it a 60-40 chance, realistically, that they'll rule against Trump because, this has come all the way up the courts. And they've already had a lot of judges depend on this. I mean, you had the trade court, and the trade court's not really known to be partisan at all. Essentially, they only deal with the technicalities of trade law. So if they say Trump's done something illegal, not illegal, but he's overstretched his authority. He probably did overstretch his authority. And of course, the appeals court affirmed that in a fairly strong affirmation. There were 4 dissents, but still a pretty good majority said he did actually overstretch, didn't buy his arguments. And basically the Supreme Court, they have 2 rubber stamps in Alito and Clarence Thomas for Trump. But Barrett, Kavanaugh, and the Chief Justice, they don't always vote in Trump's favor, so we'll have to see how that turns out. But if you want a giant rally, you better pray that Trump's tariffs get declared illegal, because that will start a chain effect of things of higher, more rate cuts as well as with all the other stuff coming into the market, more market certainty that can trigger a massive bull run. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.